more about the sound, the way that they sound. I mean, there's just some. I mean, computing is obviously incredibly more advanced than it was a decade or so ago, and the computer speeds are going up and up, and so it means you can work at higher bit rates, and so the quality is less. It's less. It's more difficult to tell the difference. I mean, some soft synths, as I was saying earlier, I wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't an analog machine. I mean, it's really, the programming is pretty incredible on some of these things.
Yeah, and that's a fairly recent development where basically the resolution of the sound has just got a lot better because they can utilise the power of sort of multiple cores of a computer. So you can have things like oversampling where it attempts to create the sound multiple times, and therefore on each iteration it gets better and better, the sound improves. So with something like oversampling, you are almost getting an analog, a sort of linear, not a bit, it's not a broken sound. It's to our ears, it's a continuous sound like analog would be, and that's really only in the last few years that computers could handle it. Consumer computers could handle it. So for us, that's great because we can get sounds that people perceive as warm and analog and all those things. You can actually start to create them digitally. Anyone with a smartphone or a tablet can approach electronic music and music making generally, which is the first time in history that's ever been the case, without access to these sort of vast studio or huge budgets. So that should, in theory, create some amazing music because it's open to. Obviously, it's not open to everyone. There are certain people who don't have a smartphone or a tablet. But yeah, generally, I think it's liberating and it's democratizing music. Generally, it's making it much more open. So no, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, and the sort of shared experience, and I guess it's a lot about the parties and people coming together, festivals, and this kind of thing. It's all not the first. I mean, electronic music hasn't made that happen, but it's certainly healthy when people can sort of mingle and come together. And I think that the electronic music scene is definitely, there's a lot more festivals and stuff happening than there ever has been. So this is all good, in my opinion.
I think the conservatories in formal music education is obviously still really important, but it's certainly not essential to make music. And I think a lot of people don't have access to it because of their background or where they live or whatever reason. They could never actually go to a proper music school. So for those people who may just have a very instinctive talent or desire for music, then yeah, it's got to be good, hasn't it, really? I would say.
Yeah. Well, it's got to relate to people's lives as well, and I think you need to have a certain amount of historical knowledge to make sense of some of that work, which a lot of the youth don't have. Not that they couldn't, but electronic music's much more accessible because it's more sort of relevant to their situations.
We were trying to be a bit more restrained, and it didn't really work out that way. And you have this sort of idea of doing something that's very minimal and very filtered and refined, but then during the process you can't help yourself but just add layers and things to it, and so that's it. Really didn't start out the way it finished, if you know what I mean. But we're really happy with the result. Yeah,
throughout our career, it's always trying to. I think we had everything that's there should have a purpose. There should be, like no unnecessary kind of fat, basically. So it's just the concise idea, and just trying to make the sounds as interesting and rich as possible, and and to have them develop So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think we did a touch of that. So, there is a little bit more restraint perhaps in some areas than we've achieved before. But I think that as Andy said, that's a constant process that I think when you first start writing, you just kind of chuck everything in, unless you're sort of really sophisticated to start with, because it just sounds great, just hearing all these layers, and also you're the creator, so you just kind of keep adding layers and layers. I think with time, I think, and maybe even to do with age, you kind of want less. You want to do more with less, really. When we first signed to them, they were an enormous help. We had our own label before we signed to them, and we weren't really making much progress with that. It was very hard to distribute it and promote it and all those things. And at that time, there were lots and lots of kind of 12 inches coming out of dance and rave kind of stuff. So they really, really helped us, especially in the early days. And now, as I said, we've been with them so long, we're kind of almost part of Warp in some respects, and the relationship is still good. We communicate with them pretty well when we release an album. In the bits in between albums, there's not all that much communication, but that's fine. We work with them for albums, but we also have lots of other side projects that doesn't necessarily involve Warp. So yeah, I'd say a really positive relationship.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot the people have changed over the years, but they as Ed says, they're not kind of very pushy with us. So we've had quite large gaps in between albums sometimes, and they're not it's really up to us. So it's a kind of ideal situation that we'll go to them and say, look, we think we've got an album here. They're very they'll contribute on the A&R, but we have pretty much a free rein to do what we want there as well. So yeah, they've been really perfect for us. I mean, perhaps a little bit of pushing might be good sometimes, but yeah, it's nice to have complete control over the output.
Yeah, and I think we also admire what they release, a lot of the other artists, and their A&R and the way they've approached the business side of music, which it's not easy to survive, and the fact that they're still here is sort of testament to this quality of what they've released. And they're trying to keep things going with the film, the film division, and they're a sort of dynamic organisation that actually does keep innovating in some respects.
Yeah, I mean, it's and because it has a great reputation, they get some very, very bright people coming through, who are very happy to work with them, and obviously we get to work with these people who bring some amazing ideas in terms of the sort of marketing and promotion and things that we're not really particularly good at. So yeah, it helps a huge amount. Sort of mixed, really, because I think as a lover of music, it's amazing to be able to find any piece of music you want. So I mean, that's incredible, but it is not wanting to join the sort of whingy musicians, but it is becoming quite difficult to sustain even a sort of basic living out of making music. And so if things aren't adjusted somehow, it's going to be detrimental to people just won't be able to afford to do it. And so I guess the streaming models, people are saying it's the way forward, and I guess with some small tweaks to the revenue that's being generated there, that could work. But I think at the moment, like 1 million YouTube plays makes about $1,000. So it's not. We would need to have about 5 million plays or more a month just to pay our rents. So it's kind of it's not geared up in our favour at the moment.
we all know that streaming and online distribution is the future, but how do you monetize that? How do you generate enough revenue to support these huge companies that rely on it? And I think everything's just going to have to shrink, and a lot of the middlemen ultimately, who are kind of refusing to go at the moment, but they will have to go. Obviously the creators are the important thing in the equation. Everyone else can kind of go if they're not needed, which sounds brutal, but if people are paying less for products, then that's the only way it can really work. But I think it's going to take another 10 years before there's a system in place that can support artists and the rest of the industry effectively, unless you're a kind of superstar and you make ultra commercial music. It's really hard to make a living, I think. I mean, if you're willing to gig constantly, non-stop for your entire life, then that kind of works at the moment. But not all artists are capable of that or want to do that. The idea that because you make music you have to constantly perform it isn't really fair on the performance or on the creators of music who aren't those type of people.
Yeah, everybody's struggling really at the moment. Well, most people that we know. But as Ed says, it's not so much us because we're kind of established. It's new writers coming up. They're not even how can they even get started, and that's gonna unmotivate them. They're just why would you go into a career in music when the payback's so minimal. But yeah, I don't know.
Certainly people who are composers, that's the only way, unless you're sort of become a Steve Reich or someone who's there are a few composers who can completely support themselves, but we know lots of people in contemporary classical who just have to teach. That's the only way they can survive, because what they do has no commercial value. They're reliant on such a small market but in a way their situation hasn't changed. They never sold records or anything like that. They're reliant on kind of government funding. Certainly in the UK, the Arts Council funds most of the kind of avant-garde or contemporary classical stuff. There are not even people really turning up at the gigs, so it's they're sort of untouched. They're okay.
You do your day job and then you work in the evening on the music. But I think unless if some of those artists aren't going to be able to become professional, then they're never going to be able to develop their skills. And I guess as time goes by and families happen, then they're going to have less free time in the evenings to do that. And so yeah, I don't know. I think on the one hand you can make music much, as Ed was saying, with a phone or an iPad now, it's very easy to have the tools to do it. So you've got a lot more people doing it. But yeah, this if people aren't supported to be professional, I think possibly the standard will drop a little bit. I don't know. I guess people will work it out basically, because if you love music and you love making music, you're just going to do it. Whatever, you'll find the time. How it's released to the public is in question, I guess. You hear a lot about this kind of this sort of desire to be famous beyond actually being famous for anything in particular. And my daughter's coming up to 8 now, and I'm already noticing these conversations with her and her mates. This whole idea of fame, and the fact that often these days it's not associated to your work or to actually having done anything to sort of deserve it. It's just that the goal is just to be famous, and that's kind of ridiculous, really, isn't it? But yeah, that's not an original thought. I mean, it's been, but yeah, I think yeah, that's well what we try and teach her, and I believe is, you know, that's really of no importance whatsoever. And in fact, you know, being anonymous would be preferable. If we were still able to sell music, then I'd, you know, prefer just not to be known at all and just get on with it. But you need to, you know, get out and about a little bit to make people aware that you've done something. Do it for the right reasons. Do it because you really love music and you love working with music. Don't do it for sort of fame or, you know, financial success. I mean, basically the currency is time, and using your time wisely, doing something that you enjoy is what it's all about in our opinion.
Yeah, and I think just having a sense of freedom, having a sense that you don't have to conform to any standards that have already been set. You can do exactly what you want, and in a way that's the advantage of electronic music, is you have this infinite sound palette. You're not restricted to real objects or real instruments. You can really do anything, and I think utilize that freedom that you have. You know, that's the benefit of electronic music. So make the most of it. Make the most of the fact that you can do these complex things or these incredibly simple things, but you can kind of almost do anything, sonically speaking.